In this video, we're going to tell you how you can become invisible, how you can end conversations quickly, and how you can just not be bothered when you don't want to be bothered, when you don't want to be in a social setting, and you don't want people talking your ear off for a long time. Now, why would you want this? Well, if you've ever seen that episode of The Office where Jim Halpert was invited to a party he didn't want to be at, but he had to be there for work, so he just wanted to show up, shake hands, get noticed, and then exit quietly without offending the people who invited him. That, plus a bunch of other related reasons, like, maybe you're just not in the mood, or you've already had a busy day, or you've talked to enough people, use these tips. Now, first off, you may be wondering, okay, what's your credibility? Why should I listen to you? Well, I'm really adept at this, and it's actually a skill set that I never wanted to be adept at. I was actually pursuing the opposite for many years. I actually wanted to be someone who was engaging, not necessarily the life of the party, but someone who often could, get engagement, interest, conversation going with people I wanted to talk to. And I just noticed over the years that I oftentimes ended up appearing or being fairly invisible. And I wasn't sure why. I just didn't have many social skills. I was kind of shy at the time, and a bunch of things just led to that result where I often felt invisible, or just kind of felt like I was someone who people didn't want to engage with. Maybe even if I did get a conversation, they would leave in like a few seconds or minutes. So why not turn this weakness into a strength by teaching those who want to learn it how to do it when they need to? Okay, so let's get started. How do you do this? Well, you have to ask yourself, why won't people want to talk to you? And this is really, I think, the core of why I was often invisible, and what you can use to your advantage when you want to use it. And that's typically being very disengaging in many ways. This can be with your appearance, how you dress, your facial expressions, and even your monotone tone of voice, but also the content of what you say. So, sadly, I was doing a lot of this unconsciously, but you can use this to your advantage. Show up in very kind of basic attire, maybe like a t-shirt. Nothing remarkable about what you wear. I mean, some people are just naturally very unique. So like if you have really cool tattoo sleeves, or a really cool haircut, or you're really jacked, that can work against you. But assuming you're generally average, you can kind of heighten that even more by just dressing very average. Let's just say white t-shirt, white shoes, maybe even a black t-shirt, and then just mute your emotions, mute your facial expressions, and just don't be very expressive. Just be very kind of monotone. And then also you can really make the speed of which you talk and the tone just kind of monotone, slow, and a bit quiet, bit boring. Don't overdo it. You don't need to overdo it. If you overdo it, it's probably going to come off unnatural and exaggerated. Maybe you're trying too hard, and they may call you out for it. But if you just do a bit of it, then they know you're not like putting on some big act, and they just assume that's you. And then I think the biggest thing is, typically when you go into a social setting or whatnot, you just kind of stand there. You don't approach anyone. If they approach you, you just kind of, have some fairly bland, boring answers and boring responses. So typically, most social settings will have the same gamut of typical questions and answers that are very common. Where are you from? What do you do for work? What brought you here? Who do you know here? How's the weather? Kind of boring drivel, but like that's a lot of people's go-to. Use these go-to questions, or maybe don't even ask something back. So you can do a mix. I used to do this a lot. Where are you from? Okay, what do you do? Or, if they come to you, like, don't even ask anything back, just answer their questions. And then, on occasion, you can maybe throw something in there so you're not too impolite. I mean, you don't want to come off too much like you're just pushing them away, because then sometimes people are like that. If you just want to quickly bore them out, you want to make it almost seem like that's just your natural self. And then you just give boring answers. Once again, you don't have to over exaggerate it. You don't have to make up the most boring place or the most boring lifestyle. Just average is oftentimes boring enough. Let's say, just say like I work in an office, I deliver mail, or just, you can dress up whatever you do to be kind of boring, even if it's kind of interesting. Let's say you work in tech, you could just say, yeah, I work in tech. If they press, you could say, yeah, I'm a programmer. I work in healthcare tech. You see how I'm doing it? And then, even when I do it in that example, that's kind of a bit exaggerated. Like, you don't even have to have that level of monotone voice. You can just be like, yeah, I work in tech. This is what I do. Oh yeah, I know that guy who was here. And then you can almost even kind of struggle to come up with interesting questions, but then out comes a boring question. So you can also be kind of like, how do you like this place? Oh, how's the weather? And it almost comes off as like you're using your brain power, and then turns out you don't have much brain power, because that's the best conversation you can come up with. And if you're really having a hard time, let's say you have this guy or girl who's just too annoying, and you want him to go away, but you can't, but you want to do it subtly, so you're not like forcing him off. You can kind of almost show a bit of neediness, desperation, that you really want to talk to him. And sometimes people will just be put off by this neediness. You can kind of show a little bit of eagerness, like, oh, where are you from? What do you do? This works especially well when you're talking to women and you're a man, because that dynamic typically creates naturally, especially if they're average, it creates that like idea of, oh, here's another guy hitting on me, and then they quickly depart. Okay, so if all else fails, I mean, you can really just not go to the event in the first place. But if you have to go and some person just not getting the hint, you can kind of be like, yeah, I'll be right back. I gotta talk to this guy, or 1 second, I gotta talk to this guy, or sorry, I gotta go. I gotta talk to this guy. Any of those variations will work. I mean, you can sometimes just be straight up and honest and just let it go. But generally speaking, what I've found is if you hit this magical state, a state that like I unfortunately naturally fell into, you can be pretty invisible and it's just effortless. And at the time, that's not what I wanted, but it's, once again, it's something that I discovered that maybe can be used for some people when they need to. Now, you may think, oh, I'll just stand there and just not talk to anyone and that will work. Or I'll just, shake hands with the people I need to, and then just blend into the background if I have to stay, or then blend in and leave. But what about those extreme cases where maybe you are an attractive, very attractive person, maybe attractive woman, and you're trying to be invisible? Now you have something working against you that maybe you can't change, even with a boring, like maybe even repulsive attire and a boring attitude, because some people are just going to come out of the woodwork to try and approach or hit on you. Well, this is a very difficult situation. How do you stay invisible? Well, there's strategies I've seen others use, other girls use, which is, they'll stay with their friends. Their friends will kind of, keep them away from other people, or they'll just, turn away from the guys, or, switch places, or say, no, thank you, or say, hey, we're having a serious conversation, sorry. And they'll do it in a friendly way. They don't, I think the best ones, the most articulate ones, the ones who are most effective, they're not actually being harsh or rude. I think I've seen people do that, and they think that's needed or the best way. But I believe that the more socially articulate ones, they do it in a friendly way. They smile, they say, hey, sorry, we're in a really important discussion. And that warmth kind of like prevents a confrontation and they get their result. You may get a really pushy guy, but then, maybe then you have to be harsh. But I would say the best way to be invisible, from my experience, not what I've seen other people do, but from my experience, when you're in a difficult situation like that where you're just constantly being hit on because of circumstances outside your control, what you can do is just be kind of not off-putting, like intentionally off-putting. Some people will do that. They'll be like intentionally giving like kind of vicious answers to say, hey, I don't want to talk. You could do that too. It's kind of passive aggressive, but I think the approach is just to be like genuinely boring. I mean, you don't want to be like, you could be the vicious type. I've seen that where it's like, oh, what do you do for fun? Nothing, with that attitude. It's a bit too much, because then they'll be like, yeah, they definitely don't do nothing. They're just saying that to, push me off. Then these people might dig deeper. What you can do is just be genuinely boring. So you can just be like, oh, I go to the gym, I work out, and then I go home, I eat, and I sleep. And sometimes I like to play Pokemon Go. And notice how I'm not even like, it's not even that boring. If I pushed it to extreme, I could have just been like, I do nothing, I eat and sleep. But I actually layered in some genuine like things I do. And you can even like throw in a few others. Oh yeah, and then like I play pickleball, and I sometimes like ultimate frisbee. And you may be thinking, oh well, be careful, they may dig into ultimate frisbee or Pokemon Go, but more often than not, if you execute it properly, it'll be a more authentic answer with that detail. But it'll be boring enough that they'll be like, yeah, okay, this person has no substance. They're just, it's not even conscious. They'll just unconsciously be like, yeah, okay, cool, great talking to you. And then they'll hop into someone else. And yeah, I think that's the key of being boring. It's, it's a mixture of shyness, quietness, not much substance, uniqueness, or interest in what they say. And then just, oftentimes not going out of the way to be extroverted, outgoing, life of the party, fun, funny, and just, that person who's not necessarily trying to be the most bland person ever, but they're just average. And it just kind of pushes people away. So that's kind of how you do it. I'm curious to see what use cases you would need to use this for. Is it for a party you were invited to, but you didn't want to go, but you have to? Or is this more so for a situation where you just don't want to be talked to because it's a social gathering or corporate gathering? Or maybe you just want to be invisible because you're a spy and you want to, not be seen, not be noticed, not be remembered while you're, at a different country doing a mission. Let me know what you think about being boring, because as someone who has, in some ways, unfortunately, stumbled into mastering it, I think it all comes down to not necessarily being the opposite and the extreme of, being super, super boring, because, that will be, in a way, inauthentic, but being so average or so non-memorable, but enough detail and average and, just enough where it's interesting to the point where it looks like a real person, but not enough to really spark their interest. And I think that, to put it in one word, it's logical over emotional. If you can be very logical with how you respond to people and just exchange information, and try and not evoke a lot of emotion like fun, excitement, shock, interest, intrigue, and it's just like, this is the information, nothing extraordinary about it. That is how you really become invisible. Thanks for watching. I know this is a weird one. Thought it'd be funny. Like, subscribe, comment.